Thank you all very much. And as you heard, I'm Swiss, and I came here when I was 8 years old, and I learned all sorts of things that were a real mystery. One of the things I learned was that in England, if you've made some money, you try and buy an old house, not a new one. There's something wrong with new houses, and if your house doesn't have a draft, try and get one, because that's normally a sign that things are going really well for you financially. So all sorts of strange anomalies. But I came from Switzerland, where if things are going well for you, of course, you invest in a new house. That's the whole point. But I learned that in England, there's a tremendous suspicion of this thing which we call modern architecture. And I couldn't really understand it, but it seems to be raging on into the 21st century. Prince Charles is still a potent force with his views on architecture. And we're generally in this country very good at exporting great contemporary architects like Richard Rogers and Norman Foster, but not so good at enabling them to actually build anything in this country. So when most people think of a nice house, they always tend to think of things that are pre-Second World War, etc. Anyway, all of this seemed deeply regrettable. And I wrote a book partly about this called The Architecture of Happiness. And the thing about writing books, well, for me anyway, is that I'm constantly struck by the thought, does this change anything? Is anybody listening? Or are you just teaching the already converted, etc.? Anyway, I decided to try and create an organization that would make available to people on a relatively modest budget great contemporary architecture. The Landmark Trust does this for old houses. You can go and rent a folly or a castle and you go and live there. But if you want to try and stay in a good piece of contemporary architecture, on the whole, you can't. Most modern houses good modern houses are in private hands and you can't visit them apart from odd occasions. And this seems to be really regrettable. So I thought, what about trying to get a group of people to build some really great contemporary architecture, getting some of the best architects and building some houses that everybody can go and stay in on a holiday. And that's more or less what I've been doing for the last 5 years, apart from writing a few books. And I want to talk to you tonight, very briefly, about 5 of these projects, which are scattered around the UK. 3 of them are available to rent now, and a couple more of them coming on next year. So let me tell you a little bit about them. First one is in Suffolk, just near the village of Woolburs on the Suffolk Heritage Coast, very beautiful part of the world. And we invited a group of Dutch architects called MVRDV to come to England and build their first project. These guys, MVRDV, have built all over the world, very sort of famous and renowned, but they never built anything in England, surprise, surprise. And so we invited them to Suffolk to build a house. They'd never been to Suffolk, very surprised at Suffolk and all its ways. They had their first Woolburs fish pie, and they're very surprised and enchanted by this. We found a site for them just inland of the A12, I think it's the A12, and there it is. You can see it in the red, and it's an old bungalow. In England, you can't build anything new unless you take something old down on the whole, especially in the countryside. So we took something down. We took this down. Some people have complained to us, how on earth dare you remove beautiful pieces of architecture in favor of modern architecture? But we did it anyway, and this is the concept that they came up with. Well, the site looks a bit like this. It's basically on a slope, going down towards a beautiful pond, a part of Suffolk Wildlife Trust. And what do you do when you've got a slope? Well, one option is to put the house at the top. The other option is to put the house on the bottom. So they were sort of playing around with this. There's the house. See the shape of a house there at the top. And they thought, well, maybe we just sit the house at the top, and then you can look down and run down the slope, etc. And they thought that was a bit boring. So why not just sort of push it along a bit, just a little bit, so you can kind of look over the slope? And they thought, why not push it along a bit more, and then a bit more, and then a bit more, whoops, and then it collapses at a certain point. So that interested them, the moment when a building looks like it's going to tip over the edge. So they came up with the idea of a house that cantilevers over the slope. And this it does very dramatically. So it's a long barn-shaped structure. They studied the barns of the area and then came up with this barn-shaped structure which cantilevers over the slope. Beautiful, stunning house. There it is, encaged in a piece of steel and very rigid. It does bounce a bit at the very end, but it's supposed to, I gather. It's very nice. It's got 4 bedrooms strung along a kind of railway carriage almost, overlooking this wildlife area, and absolutely stunning. There it is, and it's just open to the general public, and it really is quite crazy. This is why modern architecture has a troubled name, but I do encourage you. It is quite a stunning house. Here's another shot of it, and there's another shot of it. It's got a swing on the edge, and you can swing off the edge. There it is again, and there it is again. And it's got a sort of trap door underneath the shingle base where you can access the sort of secret entrance. There it is inside. Every object in it is done by a Dutch designer. So it's a sort of shrine to contemporary Dutch design. So, and it's also interesting because at Suffolk and the Netherlands, there's a real connection in terms of trade and history. So it's nice to bring some of the Netherlands into Suffolk. There's a little bit more of the inside, it's got a long sort of corridor, and that's it. Anyway, another house now. We had a habit of picking some difficult sites, and we decided to go to Dungeness, which, for those of you who don't know it, it's one of Britain's nuclear power stations is sited there on a giant shingle beach, very beautiful, very desolate and remote, and we decided to buy up an old smokery. This is Jim, who used to smoke fish, but hasn't actually smoked fish for a long, long time. He was doing all sorts of, he said he was in business. It was hard to know exactly what he was up to, but he's now enjoying his retirement. We bought his house and knocked it down and decided to make, it was 3 units, a garage, a shed with supposedly fish being smoked, and Jim's house. And we connected them all. A wonderful team of young Scottish architects connected them all so that you can now have a bath in what used to be the smokery, you can have your lunch in what used to be the shed, and you can sleep in the old sort of sleeping area. So 3 little huts have been connected very ingeniously, and there they are. So it's this very black, simple structure standing out on the shingle beach. There it is again. And there it is, just going up there now. There's a lovely miniature railway which runs in the garden of it. There it is. You can see it all. A bit more. Okay, I see time is moving relentlessly on. So I'm going to move on to the 3rd house, which is just opening, which is not so far from the 1st house, and that's in Thorpe Ness, which is a very sweet traditional village on the Suffolk coast. There it is, Edwardian, seaside, specially designed seaside town, and we ran an architectural competition, and the most convincing entry was by a team of Norwegian architects we'd never heard of, but they were great. They were somber, silent, but intelligent, and they loved particularly this house in the clouds, which those of you who know the area, it sort of dominates the flat Suffolk countryside around there, and it seems to float as an old water tower. We found a house like this. Again, some people have said it's wonderful. What are you doing knocking it down? They wanted to chop. They were very interested in the idea of floating. So they wanted to sort of somehow chop half the house. They went off to Stansted on their flight back to Oslo. And when they got back to Oslo, they faxed us this and said, "This is the house." And we got rather alarmed. But a few days later, they came up with some more designs, and that actually is what they've designed. It's a house with 4 little roof pods that are all kind of interlock, and the 4 bedrooms, and it's very, very charming and weirdly quite faithful to the architecture of the area. There it is. It's a challenging photo. It's apparently been nicknamed by the residents. Someone came up to me the other day and said, "You know everybody hates you in Thorpe Ness." I said, "Oh, that's charming." Anyway, this has apparently been named the stealth bomber by locals. But it is a very charming and surprisingly Scandinavian house. And it's very warm and cozy. Every room's got a bath in it. Anyway, that's that. I'm moving swiftly on to the Longhouse, which is by Michael Hopkins. Michael and Patty Hopkins, they did the building adjoining the Houses of Parliament and many other famous structures, Glyndebourne, etc. We took them to North Norfolk, gave them a site on the edge of a disused airbase, and they came up, and there's a bit more of North Norfolk. They were very impressed by the Flint churches of the area and came up with this, which will be opening next year. Beautiful shielded house, massive flint walls and 4 bedrooms inside. It will be very cozy. For those of you who know Hopkins's work, or those of you who don't, it's all about engineering. It's all about marrying up quite traditional materials with ingenious geometries. There's the house as it's going to look. And this appeals to the boy mechanic in all of us. Lots of this sort of thing that you're going to be admiring from your bed. Anyway, moving on to the last project, which is in some ways the most exciting. It doesn't open until the end of next year. And this is by an architect who's commonly referred to by other architects simply as God. His name is Peter Zumthor, and he's a Swiss architect who won the Pritzker Prize, which is like the Nobel Prize of architecture. He's rarely built anywhere. He's built a few buildings in Switzerland, and a few others in Germany. But basically, he's built something like eight buildings in his whole career. We've managed to get him to the UK, and in Devon he's going to build something called the Secular Retreat. His architecture is kind of timeless. We don't really know of what era. It could be ancient Roman, it could be, well, no one knows. He's built in these very eternal sort of materials. So on just near Salcombe in Devon, he's going to build a house. There's a lovely English countryside. He was very taken by it, and there it is. Lots of odd kind of perspectives you get over this rolling countryside. That's the view from the house, which sits on the top of this hill. And given that we're a very busy era, we thought, why not try and charge him with a neo-ecclesiastical mission to try and create what we're calling a secular retreat. In other words, a building that manages to evoke some of the peace and harmony of monastic architecture, but with properly functioning bathrooms too. He came up with this as his initial sketch, and we all got very alarmed. And then luckily he followed up with this, and then we calmed down. No, we got even more alarmed. And it's slowly been moving forwards, but only very slowly. Essentially, what the building is, and then he sent us some images saying that it will all become clear. And it looks like the Flintstones meets, Mies van der Rohe. It's essentially a kind of a building made up of giant slabs of rammed earth and concrete, married up to glass pavilions. It does sound very, very scary, but we promise that it'll be comfortable and very nice bathrooms, etc. There you can sort of get a sense of it, a glass pavilion, and then these sort of massive... The whole fun of the building, or the charm of the building, should be that the materials, that they'll be kind of materials you want to run your hands along, kiss, lick, and do all those things that you want to do when materials are really sort of exciting. Probably, perhaps not to you, but to some architects. Anyway, there it is on the hillside in Devon. You can sort of get a sense of it. It's this selection of pavilions with a glass all around. There they are again, and that's it. Anyway, I see my allotted minutes are coming to an end, but just to summarize, really, what we're trying to do with living architecture is to get the debate going about what sort of houses we want to live in. Property developers are, on the whole, nicely money-oriented people. They just want to build what people want to live in. And part of what we're trying to do in a very modest way is challenge people to get a bit more demanding about the sort of houses they want to live in. When it comes to food, we've made enormous strides in this country to being basically much more fussy about what we want to eat. And we're trying, in a small way, to try and make people more fussy about where they want to sleep by designing houses that I hope will be fun and enjoyable. So please come and stay, and thank you very much.